Thank you so much everyone for joining the session. This is day 4 session and again we are going to start with the recap of the previous session. In previous session we discussed about the different kind of status of the Oracle integration. So what kind of status like configured, log, draft and active. And then yes, we created integration where we added the UV parameters and we see that how we can implement the UV parameters in Oracle integration using the mapping or by adding the log message and all. We created the parameters for schedule integrations, and yes, we in last we see that what's are the metadata and what kind of details we are getting in metadata of the integration. In the today's sessions we are going to cover assign. With the help of assign only we can create variables in Oracle integration. We have different way to create variables, so we will learn that one also. After that we will move to the integration part where we will start creating integration by passing the values as a request payload and receiving the value as a response payload. So we will create various type of integration. Some integration can be only the simple integration that we will call, we will not pass any values or we will not get any response as a value. Yes, we will create some integration where we will pass some values as a request payload. We'll create if integrations where we will get some values as a response payloads of the integration. So, friend, we have already discussed that the what is the payload. So, whenever we are saying that payload, it means that whenever we are calling any API or executing the integration, while in calling the one, if we are passing any values or sending any values to the integration, that is known as a request payload. And if we are getting any values from the integration or any APIs as a response, so we are saying that that is response payload. So, we will discuss on that. So, let's begin with the integration. So first we will create the variable in Oracle integration. So as we have already created integration, so instead of moving to that, let me first create the integration, and that integration we will pass some values as a request payload. So previously, if you remember, we created one app-driven integration where we passed value as a URI parameter. So this time we will pass values as a request payload. And yes, we will discuss that what's the differences between request payload and the URI payload. So all the things we will learn here. So let me first create app-driven integration where we can add the request payload. So just we are going to click here and select app-driven and done. So here we have to provide the name. So I'm just going to provide the name XX application 01. So as we have already with the integration 01 name, so we cannot create the same. So yes, we can change the identifier or the short name for the integration so that we can create integration with the same name. So here just let me change that integration 01 to integration without request and response. Once 01, so I'm just going to create the integration created, and we know that whenever we are creating app-driven integration, we are not getting any endpoint, and we have to add endpoint to initiate the integration as a trigger. So yes, I will select the trigger connection as we have already created the REST connection for that. So yes, I'm going to add the REST connection here. We have to provide the name, so I will select start REST as a name. And here you can see again we have to select the method. So as we are not going to configure the request payload or response payload, so we don't want to change the method, that get will be fine. And here we have to provide the URI. So as we have already know that what is the URI, and it's reflecting in the URL of the API or the integration only. So as we are just going to provide URI as integration 01, nothing else. And here you can see we have option to add the review parameters, we have option to add the request payload and the response payload, but yes, we are not going to configure the request payload. So here you can see the request payload option is not enabled. Why? Because we selected the method as get, and in the get method we cannot pass any values as a request payload. That's why we don't have that option enabled. So if we select the post, you can see as we selected the post, the tab for configuring the request payload it's enabled. So if we will tick here, we will be able to configure the request payload. With the help of the third option, we will be able to add the response payload. So yes, we are not going to add anything right now. Even we can select the method post get based on the requirement. So yes, let it be post as we are not going to configure the request and response payload. next, and done. So here you can see as we have not configured any URI parameters or request payload and response payload. That's why we don't have this option enable, and directly it's move resource configuration to summary. So just click on done. So here we created, and right now you can see this is the endpoint. This endpoint tells us that we are going to start the integration, and this is the endpoint just saying that okay, we are going to end the integration. All the implementation, whatever we have to add in the integration, we have to do between these two endpoint only. So yes, while working on integration, while working on the canvas page, you can drag and drop the elements or the endpoint anywhere. And once you want to reset, just click here so that it will be reset in the initial position. So here, yeah, here what we are going to do is that we are going to create variables, and we are going to create variables. We are going to assign the values to the variables. So how we can create the variables? So for creating the variables, we have assign option. So let me first discuss why we will create variables. For storing the values and using that values for somewhere else, we required variables. For example, if you remember in last session, we added two parameters as a URI parameters, and we added the log message to print the sum of that number. But if you want to use that sum of that number somewhere else, we cannot use, because we directly print the message in log message. We didn't hold that specific value or data anywhere. For holding the specific data and using that data somewhere else, we required variables. So for creating the variables, anyone is saying anything? Yes. For creating the variables, we have to navigate to the action, and in action we have assign option. So once we will use the assign, it will ask to provide the name of that activity, name of the endpoint. So whenever we are dragging or driving any endpoint, we need to provide the name for that. And remember, whatever name we will provide, it will not be changed. So I always suggested that whenever we are going to use any endpoint name, we need to follow the naming convention. So what that endpoint is going to do and what's the name of that endpoint, we need to add the same in the providing the name only. So this endpoint is going to create variables, right? In that variables, we will store some default value and all. So that's why we will give the name as default underscore. As this is the assign activities, I will use assign. It's not mandatory to use name in such way, but yes, you can change the name. You can provide any name based on your requirement, based on you. But yes, I will always suggest that use name such a way so that it can identify the functionalities of that specific endpoint. So just click on create. So we added the assign, and inside the assign, I told you that inside the assign we have to create the variable. So yes, you can see here we have variable option, and right now we don't have any variables. So we have to create the variables. For creating the variable, we will click on this plus icon. When you will click on the plus icon, you will get option to provide the names to the variable. By default, it's here, let me delete one. So by default, whenever we are clicking on the plus icon, it's giving the name default underscore assign underscore assignment one. If we will move to the creating another one, it will move to the assign two and all. But yes, here we can change the name. So I don't want to continue with the second. So I can delete here. And yes, for providing the name here, we have to change the value from here only. So now we delete the previous name, the default name. Now we have to provide the name. So providing the name, I will always suggest that start with var. VAR underscore. Var will define that this is the variable you created, and provide the name, what kind of functionalities or what kind of value that variable is going to hold. So I will give the name as var underscore num1 or number one. So here you can see this is the data type of the variable. So whenever we are creating variable with assign activity, we have only two types of data, that a string, and previously we have the fault type, but yes, they removed. So here we have a string type only. So with the help of assign, we can create only a string type variable. But yes, whenever we are saying that a string type variable, that string type variable can store the string values, can store the numeric values as well. So here you can see this is the operation we are going to perform, and here we have to provide the value. So this variable we are going to create, and what kind of value that variable is going to store, we have to assign here. For example, we created one variable var name1 and we want to assign some values to the variable at the time of creation only. Once you will edit, it will open an expression and here we can pass the value. It's reloading, so let me check again. There is some issue in the instance. Let me reload this instance again. Here we will move to the integration part, and now you can see that integration is logged because we are working on the integration and we didn't save the integration, and due to some issue, the server issue or that the instance issue, that integration is ended. So the integration completed in the unlocked status. So we need to unlock the status. So as we have only developed, so we can directly edit, that will be unlocked and edit, and else we can move to the unlock part first. So first we will unlock. So while unlocking, we have the option unlock and discard the previous one, or no, unlock and the edit in recover mode. So we will go for edit in recover mode so that whatever changes we have done previously, that will available. So here you can see this is the endpoint and we added the assign activity, and that assign activity we didn't save. That's why we don't have that one. So again, we will add the assign here. The assign we will give the name as default underscore assign. Click on create, and here we have to give the names. Just click on plus. We have to provide the names. I will give the name as num1, and here we have to provide the value. So what kind of value we are going to assign? So once you will click here, you will get expression builder, and here we have to provide the values. That value can be coming from anywhere. So here you can see the left hand side, this is the source. This is the source from where we can pick the values, or we can directly hard code the values. So yes, I don't want to get values from here, as we know that we don't have values coming from anywhere as a request payload or somewhere else, so we can directly hard code the value. So right now, suppose I want to provide the values as 10. So I will validate and close. You can see the var num1 is created and the default values is 10.0. So whenever we are creating variable and providing the value directly, that variable value will be considered as a numeric values only. You can see 10.0 is the numeric values. We added 10, but it's reflecting as 10.0. When we provide any value in the single quotes, it will be considered as a string value. So again, we have to create another variable. So we will create another variable as var num2, and here again we will provide some values as 20. Validate, and here you can see whenever we provided the values 20 and save, it's moving as 20.0 as it's considered as a numeric value. So if we will pass the same value in single quotes, it means that we are considering this value as a string, and once we will save, you can see we have the 20 as a string value. So I want to make this as integer only, or the numeric value only. Just validate and close. So here we created two variables, var num1 and var num2. Validate and close. So with the help of this assign activity, we created two variables, and now with the help of that assign activity only, we can create another variable. We can assign values to that variable. So suppose we created two variable. Now it's time to add another variable, and that variable will store the addition of that two numbers. So here again I will drag this to this, and here I will give the name as sum underscore assign. Sum, it means we are going to perform addition operation. So we'll click and create, and now here we have to create new variable. So again we will click on plus, and we will give the name as var underscore result, and that variable is going to store the value of addition of the two previous variables. So how we can add that one? So just click here, and here you can see previously, as I told you, that whatever data we have present in the canvas or integration, all the data we will get in the left hand side. So here you can see we created two variable, and if you will drag here, you can see the two variable is reflecting here, var num1 and var num2. So we created var result, and in that result we want to store addition of these two numbers. So what we will do, we will drag this var num1 here, plus we will drag this second number. So here once you will validate, you can see the expression builder will store num1 plus var num2 values. Just close here. Here you can see where result will be created, and that result variable will store the value of addition of the two number. Just validate and close. So we are done with that. Let me add the log message so that we can display the addition of that. So here we will again add the logger. I will give the name result underscore logger create always. And here we want to show the message. We want to show the message by concatenating like result of two number is something like that. So what we will use, we know that we have concate function. That concate function is going to take multiple values and printing that multiple values is in a combination. So here I want to print something like that. Addition of two number is, and here after that I want to provide the values. That values the result variable is stored. So here you can see we have var result. So I will drag this var result here and I will add. So once you will validate, you can see the expression here. Concate addition of two number. This is the first values and this is the second value and var result. So whatever value will be in the var result, that will be displayed here. Validated and close. Again validate and close. So now we added the integration where we created two variable, that two variable having some values, and whatever values we have, we created three variable, and addition of that two value we stored in that third variable, and we added logger to print that the third variable's value. Now we will run the integration. So whenever we are creating any integration, it's mandatory to provide at least one business identifier or the tracking variable. So we will expand here and we will add the tracking variable as URI only. So now save and here you can see while providing the name we cannot use dot, you can see, right? That's why the error we are getting. So instead of that we will remove, we will say that URI save. And yes, you can see we don't have error, we are able to solve that error. So we'll save integration, close, and we can activate this integration now. Here you can see we'll activate the integration. Once this integration will be activated, we will be able to run the integration. So you can see the integration is activated now. We will run the integration. So here you can see as we don't have any URI parameter, that's why it's not reflecting here. We don't have any request payload, that's why in body we don't have any option to provide the values. So just we will click on the test and it will perform the operation, whatever operation we added in the integration. So here you can see integration completed. And remember, whenever we are running the integration, it's not mandatory to provide the log message at the same time. It takes some time to load the log message in the activity stream. So here once we run the integration, after a few seconds or 5 to 10 seconds, can we can reload the activity stream and can see the values. So here you can see again, this is the log of the integration. This log so that all the implementation of the integration. So if you will see, integration is started from here by triggering the start rest. This is the endpoint name, rest endpoint name we provided. So you can see as we given the name start rest, we can easily identify that okay, this is the endpoint we added in initiating of the integration or the as a trigger. So here what value is it source? So whenever we are executing the integration, we at the time of configuring the rest, we configure some values. So you some all the values you can find here in the message configuration. So you can see what value we added. We added method as a post. We added the URI. So this is the complete URI of the integration, and in that URI store URL. So here you can see this is the URI, and in that URI we added that integration 01. The same you can see in the URL. This is the complete URL of the integration, and here you can see integration 01 as a in the last. And this is the path. So path defined that the integration. So you can see this is the same path we will find from here. There you can see this is the integration instance, this is the URL, and this is the URI, all the details. After that what we added assign. So you can say default assign. It means that here we created the variable. So once you will click on this message hyperlink, you can see we created two variable var num1 with assign the value was assigned with 10. So we created two variable var num1 and num2 and provided the values 10 and 20. After that, we again added the different assign. You can see some assign. We can easily identify that with the name. That's why the providing the name to the endpoint in an efficient way is very important while working on the integration. So that while logging, while checking the log activity stream, you can easily identify and the process. Once we will click here, you can see the where result was assigned with 30 because that previous value we have 10 plus 20 is 30. And the same we added in the log message. So you can see log message is addition of two number is 30. So this is the simple integration we created to provide that kind of values. So now we will create integration. In that integration, we will return that value as a response payload. So right now that integration is not going to return anything, right? But yes, we will create one integration where that integration will return the value. Even we will create integration. In that integration, we will pass the value. So let me first create the integration where we will pass that two values. So here if you will see in the integration, we hard coded the value. Here in the first assign, default assign, we hard coded the value 10 and 20. And every time whenever we will run the integration, it will display the same message. But yes, we can change the value at runtime by providing the request payload. So how we can do is that, let me show you. So here we are going to again create one integration.
Hello.
Yep. Hello.
Jahar bhai, this is Pratap.
Hello.
Yeah, Jahar bhai, this is Pratap.
Yeah. Hi, Pratap.
Can we now you showed as a URL, right?
Correct. Correct.
In this
Mm-hmm.
in the log report.
Correct.
Can we use this URL as a API to the EBS like that?
Yes. Yes. That's why I told you that I will explain when we will run this integration. So right now, this is our REST app-driven integration. We can run this integration from Postman only. So whenever we are saying that we can run this integration from Postman, it means that we are going to expose this integration as a
Okay.
REST API. So all these details from where we will get everything we will learn in next 1 or 2 days. So that like all the details I can show you that what kind of values we will pass while calling the integration and all. So hopefully in next session we will
Okay.
show you. Okay,
Well,
so
thank you.
now, yeah, we are going to create integration where we will pass some values as a request payload. So what value we will pass? Whatever value we are going to hard code here. So the hard code term is used to define that we are going to use some fixed value. So here you can see this 10 and 20 is the static fixed value. We cannot change this 10 and 20 right now, right at the runtime. So that's why we are saying that this is the hard coded value. Right, so we will create one integration where we will pass these two values while running the integration only. So let me create that integration again so that I can explain you. So here again I will select app driven. Let here we have to provide the name XX AP integration with request payload 01. Create. So here we have to add the REST endpoint to configure the request payload or to initiate the integration. So I will add here. And here again we will give the name as a start rest. Next, here you can see we have to provide the URI. So again in URI we will provide something like that, integration with request. Same we can find here. I already seen that. I don't want to provide a space here. And here as we are going to provide a request payload, right? So we need to use post. So we'll select post here and you can see whenever we select the post, this option for providing the request payload, configuring the request payload will be enabled. So right now it's not enabled due to issue in the instance. So again we will change and we will pass this post. Here we will select post. So here you can see when we selected post, we have option to enable the request payload. So I will tick here so that we can configure the request payload. So when you will tick that configure a request payload for this endpoint, you can see this is the request parameters. This is the request header. So this request will be enabled. So once we will move to next, you can see we move to the next request tab. And here we have to define the request payload. So you know that whenever we are executing the REST API or calling the REST API, we have to pass some values. That values can be passed in the JSON format, XML format, in binary format as a data file and all. So right now we are going to pass value as a JSON format only. So we'll select JSON and here we have to provide the JSON file for sample. So let me create first JSON file. So here you can see, let me create one. So what kind of value we are going to provide? We have to define that value in the JSON format only. So here you can see this is the JSON format and here we have, suppose we are going to pass two values, the number one and num2. So here we will pass number one and in number one, suppose we want to pass any values like 30 So this is the sample value, right? I will show you that what's the use of that. And in number two, we are going to pass some other values, 50. So this is the request, simple request payload. This is the request payload. It means that while executing the integration, we will pass that kind of values in this structure only. So I will copy here and I will even we have two options. We can save this in .json file and we can upload that one here, or else we can directly copy the text, copy the payload, and we can bypass the same payload by clicking on this inline. So once you will click here, you can see it's asking for enter sample json payload. So we'll click here post, and here you can see once we will click on ok, the same data will be submitted as a request payload. It means that when we will run this integration, we need to pass this data in this format only. We cannot pass the data in different format. So this is the JSON format. So in the JSON format only, we can pass that kind of data. Even yes, we have option to provide the form request payload in the XML format or the binary format and all. So if you remember, whenever we are calling any SOAP services, we are passing data as a XML format because SOAP service support only XML. So yes, if you want to pass data to the REST API as a XML, we can select. So yes, as a best practice, we are following JSON only for the REST connection or REST API. So here you can see whenever we selected JSON and provided the JSON structure, by default the type media type selected to JSON. So now we will click on next and done. So we successfully able to configure the request payload in this integration. So as we don't have any response payload, that's why we don't have any endpoint here to return the value. We had that the stop endpoint. It defined that this integration will get data, perform that operation and end. It's not going to return any value. So that's fine. This is our logic. So here what we need to do is that again we need to create the variables. I will use default assign create. Here we have to create two variables, var underscore num1, and in num1 what value we want to assign. In num1 we want to assign the values, the number one we are receiving in the request payload. This is the number one. So from where we will get the request payload value. So you can see we added the start rest endpoint, and here you can see inside the execute we have request wrapper. And in the request wrapper element is the one where we are going to pass the payload. Inside the request wrapper we have only two elements we passed here, the num1 and num12. So that's why these two are reflecting here. So we can drag this num1 here. So you can see this is the complete path of this number one variable or number one payload. Just validate and include. So what it will do at runtime, this variable will be created, and whatever value we will pass as a request payload to number one, that value will be mapped here. So same way we will create second variable underscore num2, and we will map number two, the second value here. Done. Close. Validate and close. So now we are done with variable creation. Now we have to create variable. The variable will store the result. So again we will add another assign, and here we will use sum assign create, and here we have to create a new variable, that's the result. And here we have what we want to add the sum of that two variable we created, var num1 and one2. Even we can directly add the mapping of number one and number two, but yes, we created variable, so we will add that variable also. Later on we can see we don't require to create these two variable num1 and num2, as we can directly get two values from here. But yes, for the learning purpose, we are going to add that one. So here we added var result as number one plus num2, addition of num1 plus num2. So now we will validate and close. So here we added successfully. Now we have to add the log message to print the same value. So again, we will add the logger. In the logger, we will print the message. So we'll select always here. And here this times, let me print something like that. Result is, and I will map the result variable here. Validate. Here we have error because we skipped that one. So yes, validate and close. Validate, close. We have one error because of that identifier. So again, we will move here, tracking variable. And in the tracking variable, as previously we don't have any request payload, that's why this request wrapper would not reflecting. But yes, this time we added the request payload, that's why it's showing here. In previous video, if you will see, we created where integration where we passing as a URI parameter, so that parameters is also reflecting here. So yes, we can add here, and here we can provide the number one, or we can say the name num1. And we know that the tracking name is useful for tracking the integration, or checking the log messages, identifying the integration. So we'll save, close, and we are going to activate this integration. So here we activated the integration, and it's time to run the integration. Click on test, and here you can see, as we don't have URI parameter, that's why it's not showing here. But yes, we added the request payload. That request payload will reflect in the body. So once you will move to the body, here you can see this is the request payload. And this is the same value we passed as a simple payload. You can see this is the simple payload, right? We passed as a time of configuring the request trigger endpoint. So this is the value. They said that in this structure only we have to pass some values, right? So here, suppose I want to pass num2 as 100 and num1 as 50, right? So here we can change the message. By default, whatever request payload we added, it will reflect here. At the time of executing the integration, we can change the value, right? So we change the value. Now once we will click on the test, these two value will be passed as runtime to the default assign, the variable we created, and the sum assign will store that this addition of these two values. So here once we will reload, you can see that in default assign, you can see the var num1 assigned with 50, as we map number 1 with the num1 and num2 with the number 2. So you can see number num2 assigned with 100. Once we will click on the message, you can see we have addition is 150, and the same we printed in the result is 150. If we will pass instead of 100, if you will pass 6, and here if you pass 9, addition will be 15. So once we will click on the test, reloading. So here you can see log message result is 15. 9 plus 6 is 15. And if you will see the default assign, we will have the same value, whatever value we passed from here. So var num1 9, var num2 6. So this is the simple way we created integration by passing some values. So but now we are going to create integration so that whatever will be the addition here, right? We don't want to print the addition in log message. We want to print the addition. We want to get the result of these two number, addition of these two number in the response payload. You can see in the response payload, we don't have anything. But now we will pass some values, and whatever will be the addition of the two value, we want to get return here. So how we can achieve? So let me create the integration and I will show you how we can do that. So what kind of addition or what kind of data we need to return? We have to predefine, or we have to identify the response payload, same as we define the request payload. So here you can see we created the structure of the request payload. So same we will create the structure of the response payload. Response payload. So what kind of response we want to return? We want to return response as result, and here whatever will be the addition of these two, we want to get here only. So suppose 150. 80. So that kind of things we want to as a result. So I will copy the same and we will provide in the request response payload structure. So here for creating the integration, again we need to move to the integration part, and here for creating the integration I will click on create, app driven, and select. Here we have to provide the name, so I will provide the name xx ap request and response payload 01 create. And again we have to add the endpoint, so I will add all the endpoint one by one. So here we will add first rest endpoint to configure the request and response payload. We'll give the name as a start rest. Next, here I will give the name as URI as addition. I will select method as a post so that we can configure request and response payload both. So for adding the request payload, we selected tick here. For adding the response payload, we need to select here. Once we will select both, the response and the request will be enabled. So go next. Here you can see we are in the request page. In the request page here only, we need to select the request structure. So I will select JSON, and this is the request payload. I will copy here and paste. Now here you can see it's automatically added, and once you will click, you can see this is the payload we passed here. And now it's time to pass the payload for response payload, you can see. So again, we will select JSON here. And as I told you that we can upload the file, or even we can directly put the data here in the inline. So let me create one JSON file and I will show you how we can upload this. So I will save this as a, let me save on the desktop only. Desktop we are going to save as response dot JSON. Save. So we already created one file with this same response payload. So I will upload the file here. So just click on the choose, and here we have to select the response one. So here you can see this is the response.json created right now 9:42. I will select here. So once we select the file, you can see the same data will reflect here in inline. You can see we didn't pass, but as we uploaded the file, so whatever data will inside the file is reflecting in our sample payload. So now we are done with that. We'll go next and done. So we are successfully able to add the REST endpoint to configure the request and the response payload. So as you do, so you can see that here. Let me open the previous integration. As this integration is not going to return any response, that's why we have a stop endpoint. And but yes, here you can see as this integration is going to return back response payload, that's why we have this return option, the return endpoint. And this return endpoint for which one? So you can see this is the start rest endpoint, and this return is for the same start rest. And what kind of values this endpoint is going to return, it will define by the mapper. Mapper is the element which is going to provide the values to the next element, or we can say in the response wrapper or somewhere we are going to map values to any endpoint. With the help of mapper we can provide the value. So yes, this is the return endpoint, and in that endpoint we want to provide some values, so that value will be provided by this mapper only. And you can see the map to start rest. This is the start rest endpoint where we configure the request and the response payload. This will get some data, and as we configure the response payload sample, the same response payload we will pass here, it will return. So what kind of data for that response payload it will return? It will return the data coming from this mapper only. So we will add the mapper in last here, right? So now we have to add the variable to store the sum of that two numbers. So again, what we will do, we will assign the one and we will give them. So instead of creating the variable for holding the two values, whatever values we are passing as a request payload, we will directly create variable to store the addition of the two numbers. So we will give the name as sum and assign create, and here we will create one result variable where underscore result, and that variable we will add the addition of the two numbers. So this is the first number, I will drag this number here, plus this is the second number we will drag here, validate. So you can see once we validated, it's showing that number one plus number two. We directly map here. Even instead of directly mapping, we can use bracket to specify that the both number is different. There is no need to add this bracket, but yes, whenever you will add the bracket, it will be easy for you to identify that which one is the first values, which one is the second value. Right, so here you can see this is the first value, this is the second value. So right now it's very a small expression, it's easy to identify, but later on if we will add multiple values here, it will be difficult to us for us to identify. That's why we added we use this best practice to provide the bracket here. So once we validate, close. So you can see this var result variable will store addition of that two number which is coming from the request payload. So now done. So now it's time to map the response payload. So this is the mapper for response payload. So remember, whenever we are adding the request and the response payload to the integration, all the implementation of the integration will be done between this endpoint and this two endpoint, right? So we cannot add anything here. If we will add anything here, that will not be mapped here, right? So once we perform the operation, this value will map here. That's why we have to first, before going to map, we have to first perform the operation. Now we are going to map this value in the response payload. So here we will edit the response wrapper, and you can see in the response we have result element, right? So same result element we will get here. So you can see this is the request wrapper. This is the request wrapper of the start rest endpoint. Here we configure the request wrapper. If you will see in the request wrapper, we have two variable, num1 and num2, as we passed here. And in the response payload, once you will expand, you can see this is the result. This is the result we mapped there, right? So now we have to map this result value with the var result. So we'll map directly here. So whenever you will map anything to the endpoint, the expression builder open. So right now this expression builder is in view only mode. View only mode, it means we cannot change any value here. But yes, for changing the value, we have to go to the developer mode by clicking here. So we move to the developer mode. Now you can see we can change the value. So same as if we want to define the result, so we can directly, you can see the variable we map directly here, it's mapped here. If we want to remove the mapping, what we can do, we can just right click here and delete the target node. Once we delete the target node, you can see this result is deactivated. It means this is not going to return any values here. So again, if we want to map the value here, we have the first option, we can directly map here. The second option, right click and click on the create target node. Once you will create target node, the expression builder will open here. And here we have to provide the value. If suppose you want to provide hard coded value, we can directly provide here 30 and we will check. So every time whenever integration will executed, it will return back hard coded values as 30 only. But yes, we want to return the values coming from the variable. So the first way that we can directly drag variable here, and the second way we can create the target node, and once we target node created, we can drag this variable here. This is the same. So here for validating or saving, just click here and you can see once we added, the variable is mapped here. So right now if we didn't map anything, it will directly return back the result in numeric values. But if we want to change the values, we can use the concat. So again we will use concat, and I want to display message like addition of two number is. So instead of using two number, we can use map these two values, right? So what we can do, we can provide addition of num1. So here we have to provide the value of num1. So what we will do, we will add this hard coded value here and we will map here num1. Addition of num1. Now we have to add, and this is a hard coded value, and we have to map these two. So first we need to separate this one, so that's why I will use single quotes, now comma. So concat function is going to use comma separated values to combine the same value. So you can see this addition is one values, then we added the comma here. If you will able to see here, hope you are able to see right now. So this is the first value, this is the first hard coded value, comma, this is the value coming from the request payload, that the num1. Again we want to concrete another values, that is hard coded value, that's why we given comma. And here we have the, in the single quotes we have different values, and after the and again we want to concrete another value. So here we given comma, and again we will drag num2 here. So here message will be addition of num1 and num2, and again we want to add hard coded values, something like that is. And now we want to print the value of result. So here we have var result, we will drag var result here and we will close here. So this concat function is going to close here. Once we will tag, you can see it will show the value. You can see in the expression it's showing that we added the this one addition of all these two we are mapping in result, that's why it's showing the mapping, something like that. So here you can see what value we are going to show. We are going to show addition of number 1 and number 2 is the final result. So now we will validate and close. So here now we have to add the tracking variable. So let me add another tracking variable here. We will drag this tracking variable here, save. Now save and close. So we are done with the integration where we configure the request payload, response payload, and perform the addition operations. So here we activated the integration. It's time to test or run the integration. In body we provided two values. These two are the sample value we added. We can change the value. So let me change the value as 45 and the num1 as 67. So here you can see the first value it's showing num2, number 2, and the second value is showing number 1. But in the request payload we pass the number 1 first, then number 2. So there is no any differences, as that's the features of the JSON structure. The flexibility of JSON, we can pass the value in any format. There is no mandatory that the value we provided here in the first, we need to pass in the first. There is no requirement that kind of things. We map the value number one with the num1, so it will directly reflect this value over there. It will not find the sequence of the values in which sequence we pass. But yes, a structure should be same. So here, whatever value we provided here, once we will click on test as a response payload, it will return the addition of that two. So we will click on the test, and here you can see in the below, we got the result. We got the result at addition of 67 and 45. You can see 67 is the first number and 45 is the second number. You can see we as a request payload, we have not passed the value in the series, the sequence, but yes, in result we got the sequence. Why? Because we have used mapping. And you can see the addition of 67 and 45 is 112. If we will change the values to here 100 and values to 200, so again it will show the result as 300. You can see addition of 200 and 100 is 300. So this is the way we create integration where we configure request and the response payload. If you will see the log message, I want to check. Yes, here let me refresh so that we can show you the debugging. So here you can see we created some assign, and in some assign we added the result addition, and here you can see reply to start arrest. It means this is the value we are going to return here. So what value we return, same value we can find here in the message. You can see response wrapper, inside the response wrapper we have result, and in result we map that value. You can see addition of 200 and 100 is 300. And how we provided the mapping, so here you can see data mapper completed for the rest, and you can see here this is the result we provided in the mapping. So for again, for tracking the variable, tracking the instance, we can directly navigate back to the monitoring. Inside that monitoring, we have integration, and here we have tracking. So all the integration, whatever we executed, we can find from here. Here you can see we added num1 as a tracking variable. So here you can see number one, we have 200. Suppose we want to check with value 67. We know that the number one we pass 67. If we will search 67 here, it will show us the integration. That's the use of the tracking variable we added. So this is end for the today's session. Yes, if you have any other queries, you can come up and ask if you want to ask anything. Anyone having any queries and want to ask, we are here to give you the reply for that. Else we can close the session for today.
Yeah, or by can you tomorrow or day after tomorrow, can you show the real time integration?
Yes, brother, before going to continue for the real-time integration, first we need to complete all the elements here. So suppose for
Okay.
creating the real-time integration, we need to call third-party API. So how we will call the third API, we have to explain there. For adding that, we are going to return some response, how we can map this response, all these things. So first that we have to cover few elements. So few elements like we need to go for the looping statement, we need to go for the if else statement, all these things. So hopefully tomorrow we will cover, and maybe on Monday we will show you the real scenarios like calling the BI report or calling the any REST API or any API to perform different transaction in Fusion.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining the session. Thank you so much all. Bye. We will meet in next session. Thank you so much again.